Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we'll be discussing two important topics. First, obviously, Iran and the situation in Middle East. And second, we'll be discussing the community, the Muslim community. What are they doing? The scholars, the mosque, our leaders, what are their responsibilities? How are they responding? What kind of clarification are they giving to the Muslim community? So we have with us today is Abdus Samad. He is a local businessman and a community activist. And he's going to discuss, we're going to have a really friendly, relaxed discussion where he's going to tell us what he thinks, what he has discussed with the community and his findings. So this is something that we'll be, examining a bit more with Abdus Samad. I want to find out a bit more about, your thoughts and your findings and your dialogues with the Muslim community. So I want to start off with, obviously, you're following the news and the conflict that's happening in Iran. Obviously, we know that USA and the Zionist regime, they've gone in, they bombed, and they started off killing children. Yeah, so 160 children were killed. So the first place they bombed, the Zionists, were the school. So so tell me about a bit more. What's your thoughts and how do you see this conflict unfolding?
First of all, I mean, the conflict was in the making for a decade. It was something that was it was pre-planned. It was inevitable. It was, sooner or later it had to have happened. I think Iran was very much aware of that, and it has taken serious measures to sort of be prepared to respond to such an event.
So Iran said they've been preparing for the last 20 years.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And more so since the Gulf War of Iraq. They knew that they were next in line.
Yeah.
And it's something that's been brewing in the background for a long time. Israel needs this sort of wars in order to sort of destabilize the region, to fulfill its sort of objectives in the region, which is expanding, and they want to create the greater Israel, and they're following that project through, really. So yes, I mean this whole thing. I mean, America has been resisting for a long time, but as we,
what do you mean by resisting? Are you saying that America didn't want to go to war?
America didn't want to. Even Trump doesn't really believe in this war in any way to be in favor or in line with American policies. But as we know, with the revelation of the Epstein files and things like this, we know that the whole of the Western world is compromised. Israel has blackmail on all major political parties and figures throughout the whole of the West, and therefore, basically,
So are you saying that it's a cover up? The war is to cover the files, because now everyone's talking about Iran. Only a couple of weeks ago, it was actually Epstein file. As in a lot of the Lord Mandis and all those people that came out, and these were exposed. Yes. So are you saying that there could have been more, and because of the
these were
the Iran war, the Houthis?
See what we saw was that this whole thing about Epstein files was being dropped piece by piece, and this was applying pressure upon Western nations, Western politicians, political parties to sort of follow through the demands and dictates of Israel. Israel needs America and other European countries to carry out this mission in order to sort of fulfill Israel's objectives. And this is where I'm saying my understanding is that, yes, the Western world is reluctant, but the fact that they are tied up in this mess, and Israel has, whatever it takes, to make sure that they either fulfill this thing or basically, the Western systems crumble.
So what I understand from what you're saying is that it's not America's war.
It's not. It's not.
It's
I mean,
Israel's war, and
it's Israel's war.
Israel has pushed it. We know what they've done in Iraq, for example.
Yeah.
In terms of the false flag of nuclear weapons and all that nonsense. Yeah. So Israel was pushing Donald Trump for the last 2 years. While they were bombing Gaza, they were pushing.
That's right.
For Iran to be attacked. And obviously we saw the 12 days war, which, didn't really.
Yes.
Really didn't have any sort of impact.
That's right. 12-day war, I mean, was called off because they were in a situation where they couldn't actually handle Iran's retaliation. It was causing a lot of damage to Israel, and from there they thought if they take out the leadership of Iran, that they will stand a better chance. So they took time out to sort of like organize, and this is where we see the death of Khomeini. They thought that Iran would just collapse from within, but that's not happened. And this was a very big sort of like miscalculation from Israel and the US. They thought that they were gonna pull it off, where it's just gonna the whole regime is gonna crumble. So they applied the sanctions initially. They propped up these Mossad-led protests from within, and Iran successfully managed to sort of like contain these situations. And now that this whole thing has broken out, it's not looking good for Israel or US.
What about the attacks that Iran is, implementing on the Arab nations like UAE, Qatar? Do you think it's justified? Do you think that?
Well, Iran is more specifically targeting American bases and American interests within the region, so it's definitely justified. It's a part of resisting, because these are the bases that are going to be used by America and Israel to launch its attack against Iran. So it just makes sense that Iran is going to target these places, and rightly so. However, there have been many attacks that was pinned on Iran, which Iran denies. So other civilian sort of like targets or oil infrastructure, these sort of things. Even there was an attack on Turkey, and Iran rejected the allegations.
Well, there was an attack on the British base, isn't it, in Cyprus?
Yes. Even that one,
that wasn't Iran.
Iran didn't even do that one. Yeah, Iran didn't take responsibility. So what I can see is that at the moment, yes, US is in there, but I think what they're trying to do is bring in all their NATO allies wholeheartedly, because at the moment even Europe is very reluctant. Europe isn't fully engaging in this, so I think this is a tactic that is being employed by Israel, where it's shooting down American bases and European bases, and
is it because they want them to come in?
So Iran, basically Israel wants a wider conflict, and this is this could potentially spiral out of control. Some are saying that it could be the World War, lead to World War III.
Well,
and there is potential for this.
What do you think of Russia and China? Do you think they're helping them?
I think at this stage, Russia and China, they are not getting involved directly.
Yeah.
So there are possibly indirect support that is being given to Iran.
Because we know that
and
Iran supplied a lot of those drones.
Iran will not confirm nor deny
Yeah.
the sort of logistical maybe or other support that they may be receiving from Iran and China. But even Iran, I think it is proven to be a serious, military power.
Pakistan, they've got nuclear weapons. So that's a concern for them, isn't it? If they're radical Muslims, Islam was to come in somehow, Taliban-like regime, for example, in Pakistan. Obviously, for the moment, Pakistan is quite cozy with USA. Excuse me. So what do you think? Do you think that there's a possibility?
There is a possibility. I think. I hope as well. I do. I hope one of the at least one of these Muslim nations, so-called Muslim nations. I hope that this situation, creates, an opportunity where some of these regimes fall, and new powers, come in that are more sort of like in line with the feelings and sentiments of the Muslim Ummah. Yeah, because at the moment, I mean, like if you look at the example in Bahrain, while Iranian missiles were actually hitting Bahrain, targeting specifically American bases and things like this, we saw the people in the streets were, rejoicing. They were celebrating. This is what they want. But this is not reflective of the regimes that occupy these countries. Yeah. So some people, are very quick to judge. They look at these situations and they assume that the people are, not.
You've actually triggered something. So just a quick thought. You talked about regimes in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, all of those. They pay a lot of money. We know like 1.4 trillion was paid only when they were flattening Gaza. Was paid to USA. Yeah. So these regimes, they are buying their protection.
Absolutely, they are.
And you see that, what happened to that protection? Do you see it?
Now they're complaining. Now, the Gulf nations are complaining that here we are. We've supported and we backed and we America, but at the moment America has abandoned us.
Yeah,
and they're protecting only Israel, and we are left hanging. And this is the thing. I think these regimes, they need to realize at the end of the day, right? They are not cared for. America will, if need be, America will destroy these regimes. And no matter how much you sort of like suck up to these, powers, all right, they're only there for their interests, and they will.
But they've been very clear from day one. If you look at Biden, what did he say? He said, look, if there was no Palestine, Israel, we would create an Israel.
That's right.
Do you see? Because so a lot of people, they say Israel controls USA. I have doubts. What do you think?
I don't. I think Israel does control USA. I mean,
in what ways? Because if they're looking for their interests, Israel is just something they're using like all the Middle East countries.
Yeah, I think what we need to understand is that the Judeo-Christian thing that we keep hearing in the media and from the mouths of politicians, when they're talking about Judeo-Christian values, this is Zionism basically. So what you have are the elites of these Western nations, right? They are, they are Zionists,
yeah,
right? And they will support Israel. They are Israel. And what's happening today is that there is a power shift from the West to Israel, and the so-called Judeo-Christian, movements within the Western nation. This is what they believe in. And a part of this whole thing is actually, going to result in the destruction of the West, because the power has to shift to Israel eventually. And
someone could
this,
say this is conspiracy theory.
of course they can.
I mean,
of course they can.
You got to back
but
it up with some sort of
that's right. But if you,
evidences.
yes, but if you listen to a lot of these rabbis, a lot of these Jewish, high profile Jewish people, they've been saying this for decades, that the West has to, disintegrate. The West has to be destroyed in order for them to then rule the world.
What do you mean by destroyed? Physically, or in terms of economically, ideologically? What is it?
In every sense. I mean, even
Can you give me an example? Ideologically, give me an example.
Western ideology is already crumbling.
Yeah.
If you look at the so-called international, law, if you look at, freedom of speech, if you look at all of these things are being eroded every single day. And these are the things, the West thought that, this is it. This is what we're about. This is how we do things. But these things are constantly being undermined and eroded. Mm-hmm. All right. And who is doing all this? Is it the Muslims? Is it the Christians? No, this is Zionism. Yeah, so this is the Zionist plan. Zionist plan is to completely destroy the Western civilization as it exists, and I mean, from there, when you talk about economically, we can see the Western world is crumbling also economically.
And is Israel or the Zionists, are they benefiting from that? How are they benefiting from that?
How are they benefiting? Basically, if you look at, the Western world, I mean, the amount of money that is being sucked out of America to build, support, Israel is phenomenal. It's the amount of money. And while in America, you have people that are, completely complaining, homelessness, drugs, all of these things. And
Tucker Carlson, for example, he's been very vocal, isn't he? Very vocal in terms of how Israel is using America to advance their, political aims and objectives.
That's right.
So there are people that are Candace Owens. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There are certain figures within the West now, America. They're recognizing the whole pattern. Something that was spoken about for decades, they can now see it happening, unfolding, and they're trying to sort of like, reclaim some of that, which, I don't know if it's possible now, because the thing has sort of like evolved. It's already there. So you look at like APAC, the amount of support, the amount of control they apply to the America, for example, even UK or other European countries. You can see they literally control everything, from judiciary, from legal system, you name it. Every single sector, key sectors of
these, they bought out a lot of those.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
a lot of those people, almost, isn't it? Yeah. What I want to say is, so who are the real winners then? Are you saying that it's only Israel and America doesn't get anything from that?
I know it sounds like a conspiracy, but
I'm just thinking it's a hard sell, isn't it?
Yeah, but those people, I think those people from the Western societies, the elites, they see themselves as a part of Israel and what it's being constructed there. So they feel safe. They no longer really care for their own citizens, own populations, own nations, because they understand this whole Judeo-Christian sort of like program that is, there to create the new superpower, that will rule the world from Israel, from the greater Israel. And this is where they see themselves.
It's a bit like the British Empire. That's a small island, but it took, half of the world.
Yeah. So this is what they're working towards. And yeah.
So well, I think, look, from there, I think, yeah, we've looked at like the Western policies and what their objectives are. But in terms of the Muslim world, for example, the Arab world, yeah, we've got the regimes and we've got the citizens. But then we have the scholars, for example, yeah. What are their role? What's their role in this whole jigsaw?
What's their role? I mean,
Yeah.
when you're asking that question, I mean,
there's a lot of movements, isn't it?
yeah, when you're asking that, I mean, are you asking that what does Islam say that their role is? And I mean, that is pretty much clear. You know, they're supposed to guide, they're supposed to lead the ummah, they're supposed to enlighten,
But they're not doing that, obviously, we can see
clarify,
that,
and
isn't
they're simply not doing that
Yeah.
Now, is that happening because they don't know what needs doing, or is it because that they have created a system by which these so-called institutions, organizations, are sort of like unable.
Mhm.
And I think
I want to first just discuss like the scholars or some of those influentials who are not in the UK that affects us, but generally in social media, we can see some of those scholars, how they've responded to Gaza, how they're responding to Iran, for example, yeah. And, they're very like cautious, tiptoeing.
yeah.
Tiptoeing. I don't want to mention no names, but that they've been called out. Yeah, they've been called out. The muftis have been called out. What do you think?
Why we have so many Muslims, yet our voice is so insignificant and so divided, so sort of like, powerless, is it something that just happened haphazardly, or is it a part of a program, something that, makes us that way, and I think that's what needs to be really investigated. Since World War II, basically, there's been a new world order, if you like, and so with the destruction of the Ottoman Caliphate, and nationalisms, balkanized the entire Middle East and other places. What happened is that Muslims started to come in to the Western world.
Yeah.
Like there's a big sort of like influx of Muslims from Asia and other places
after Second World War.
Yeah. Now, Britain had a situation at hand.
Yeah.
How does it manage a people that are Muslim, who have a different history, who have a different identity, different, so there was a thing where they needed to now integrate Muslims within the British Empire, if you like. So this is where, it was a big issue. These things were discussed and debated within the British Parliament. There were a lot of Muslims from the subcontinent that actually fought alongside the Allied forces.
Yeah.
Many of them may or may not have realized that they were actually fighting against, say, Turkey, for example, or the Ottoman Caliphate.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people were actually loyal to the empire. These are the first generation of people that actually came in to Britain to settle. And when they did, I mean, the British establishment had to accommodate and facilitate for this new people. But at the same time, I mean, they needed to make sure that these people were fully integrated. They respected the empire. They became a part of the empire. And so at that point, they actually established, say, the East London Mosque Fund.
Yeah.
Now that was there to sort of like, facilitate the integration process of the Muslims coming to the shores of Britain. Now, somebody asked me, I mean, yeah, that may have been the case then, but do you think that, this is something that East London Mosque is doing now.
Or any mosque.
Or any mosque. I mean, you see, East London Mosque is not.
Are you just giving an example?
I'm just giving you an example. Yeah. Now, East London Mosque actually sets the template. If you understand, yeah. So East London Mosque is the template that the empire has created to integrate Muslims, all right, to be sort of like part of the British society, to create this new identity, and so on. Yeah. So, and that became the template. So with this thing, they've brought in all these loyal subjects of the British Empire, and they've given them their religious facilities and whatnot. But they are now in control of the narrative. They're in control of the narrative that is going to come out of these institutes, these organizations, these mosques. And this is why, you will find that, you sign up to the Charities Commission and you're no longer political. You can't really express your Islamic views on what's happening in Gaza. Or if you do, it's going to have to be, a simple dua maybe, or, something like that. But apart from that, it's not your problem.
I know we've come to local issues, but obviously initially I wanted to discuss, some of the scholars, clerics from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East and, all the Muslim world. But I'm fine. I'm happy with that. You can obviously, you want to link with the local, what we see here in terms of the scholars and the imams and our masjids, how they're responding to the Iraq and Gaza war and how they have responded.
What I'm saying is, like these reactions and responses are very much, engineered.
What do you mean?
Engineered in the sense that, they've created these bases where they control the dominant narrative of a community.
Who controls that?
The establishment. The establishment controls the dominant narrative. So, like, for example, say for example, in the 90s, they facilitated a conference in East London Mosque for Al-Awlaki.
Yeah.
Now, immediately after that, there's been some complaints, some concerns raised by the establishment. Why and they had to kind of like retract and apologize and say, look, we weren't responsible for this. It was. Is it
because they've got a charity commission and all that stuff that they've signed up to, and therefore they have to, be very mindful of what they say. It could be that.
So my point is this. My point is this, that we can see ultimately. I mean, this may be your justification, but the point is the reality doesn't change. The reality on the ground doesn't change. So the thing is, you have signed up to this thing where now you're going to trim Islam to suit the establishment's agenda.
So what's the response from the Islamic leadership in the Muslim world?
Obviously, the response is very bad. Where with the Muslim community needs guidance, it's not getting the right guidance. Where the Muslim community needs a voice, it's not getting that voice. And this didn't happen just haphazardly. Yeah? These were after generations of colonialism. Under the colonial rule, they've changed a lot of sort of like things in Islamic teachings. So some key things were taken out from Islam, such as jihad, such as khilafah, and all these things. Yeah. So the necessary weight given to these things were completely taken out. With the destruction of the Ottoman Caliphate, the British found, people that are, loyal to the empire.
Yeah.
And these were the movements and groups that were supported, backed, and, promoted even to the wider Muslim audience. So, in the Middle East, we saw like, the Wahhabi movement, which was very much a part of the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Caliphate. Mm-hmm. These are the regimes. They, to this day, they hold on to these ideologies and this branding of Islam to not serve Islam, but rather serve the empire. Similarly, we've had an influx of Muslims that were loyal to the empire, who also fought against the Islamic Caliphate, who later sort of like, came in to mainland Britain. And they were the first people to set up Islamic organizations and, mosques and things. And they were very loyal to the British Empire. They were sympathetic. They supported, and they take pride in having participated with the Allied forces, and fought against the Caliphate or Ottoman Caliphate, for example. Now, the question is here, when these people, they set up these mosques, they set up these organizations, there's there's a purpose. Now, this purpose is to control the mainstream narrative within the Muslim community. This is what their mission and objective is. Now, it may sound like a conspiracy theory, but if you actually study the key founders of, say, East London mosque, a lot of these people were like the Rothschilds. There's Aga Khan. Do a little bit of research and study on these people. These people were far from Islam, if you like. I mean, from non-Muslims to so-called Muslims, and they've dedicated their life to the British Empire. And these are the people that have set up this institution. Now, for a purpose. They want to accommodate the loyal servants of the British Empire to dominate the mainstream narrative for a community. And this is why you can have the odd individual, Muslims complaining about what's happening in Gaza, demonstrating and all the rest of it, but you won't hear a peep from our mosques. Maybe just a simple dua.
Or they will advise you to go to the demo.
They advise you to go to the demo. But, these demos are also, very sort of like controlled, focused towards appealing to the empire. So, they simply don't want you to look outside of the empire for any type of solution.
Our community, what you're saying is very difficult to digest, you see, because this is something that's not apparent, isn't it? You can't see that. This is not something that's been discussed. So unless you, like you said, unless you do your research or you study the history, you will find all of these information and then you can put together, yeah. But general public or general, the Muslims or, I don't know, the imams or whatever, they're not, you talked about masjid that's been influenced by the government and whatnot. That was then. Someone can say, oh, that was like 50 years ago. But there's a new management, there's new people that are there. They don't believe in that. They don't have no connection.
See, what we need to understand, when there's a system in place, when there's a working order in place, it automatically recruits that mindset. It breeds that mindset, and it organizes and produces the same result. So, I mean, if you look at ELM, for example, I mean, a lot of their sort of like, top tier management are OBE, or, they are open to
liberal value,
to support. They're open to support the British Empire. They identify with the British more so than identify with the people of Gaza. You have imams that talk about our boys in Afghanistan, referring to the British armed forces. I mean, where is all this coming from? It doesn't just happen. These are ideas that are worked on. These are ideas that are, made. This new wave of people coming from the subcontinent, They are going to be of different values. They have a baggage of Islamic identity, history, culture. So how do we melt these people into this sort of like thing? Yeah. And this is where they need to control the mainstream narrative. The Islamic narrative, mainstream Islamic narrative has to come from there. And they control that through, Charities Commission and legislations and all these other things. Yeah, they're going to control that. And this is where you can have, yeah. So you can have like the whole Muslim community in Britain, talking about Gaza and all the rest of it, but you won't hear anything from the mosques. You won't hear anything from key personalities, because they have been co-opted to represent the mainstream voice for the community.
What if they don't represent the mainstream voice?
So when
do you think they'll be labeled as extremists?
Yeah. So soon as they sort of like if they reject or if they refuse to comply with the establishment's demands, they will be labeled. They will, their mosques will get shut down. They will suffer other consequences. Yeah, they'll be banned. Yeah. So these are the things. Yeah, and this is it. This is what they will tell us. Look, we can't say it because we don't want to lose our mosque, and for a lot of Muslims that is justified. But really, Islamically speaking, is that justified? It's not justified. You see. So because we have to follow Islam, we can't, our Islam cannot be held ransom by, a criminal entity. Do you see? So, and unfortunately, we are allowing for that to sort of.
So what can the general Muslim, you and I, when we discuss this, obviously this is a discussion where not everyone's having that discussion, but how can we get that discussion going within the community? How will that help the people of Iran and Gaza?
Yeah, I say basically, the people, we have to be a bit more sort of like, aware of reality. We have to be more informed, and we have to start accounting these institutions and organizations that claim to be mainstream. Mm-hmm. Because, the whole objective, I feel, is that so long as the establishment controls the mainstream narrative of a Muslim community, we won't get anything. Do you understand? Because really you and me, we can discuss all these things, but we will always be dismissed as the fringe. Yeah. Yeah. Regardless of how strong our views are, how clear and our sense of direction is, we'll always be just dismissed as the fringe, because we will not represent the
even if you state the obvious.
Yeah. So what I say is that there is this thing called the propaganda of silence.
What's that?
Yeah, propaganda of silence is that, silence creates a narrative. So when you're not talking about a particular issue, all right, that means that issue gets sort of like diminished and undermined. So you can talk about Gaza, but the very people that are supposed to be your voice in the community are not going to talk about it. That's propaganda at play. That's you being shut down. That's your concerns, your, things that you care about, what Islam cares about, is being shut down. It's being suppressed. You see? So this is the propaganda of silence. So we say, okay, the BBC is very biased. What you will find is like, even right now, when Iran is literally obliterating Israel,
yeah,
you're not going to see that in the media. They're not going to show much. They're going to show you all the destruction that is taking place in Iran. What is that? That's propaganda. So they choose to focus on one thing and omit something else. Mm-hmm. Do you see? Mm-hmm. So it gives a false perception of the reality. And our Islamic sort of like representation is also projecting a false sensation and a reality of the Muslim Ummah. You see, because what they're doing, they're towing the government narrative without telling you that they are. They're actually, feeding into that. Now, the question is, are they deliberately doing it? Are they insincere? I wouldn't want to go there. I don't want to say that they're insincere and they're deliberately harming. I feel they don't even understand the program that they're actually following. They don't.
Some could accuse them of agents. Some are obviously naive, isn't it? I mean, that could be the case.
I mean, when you enter into these situations, then you just play by the rules basically, and then you justify these rules and
how do you justify for the Islamic terms?
Sometimes you try and justify Islamically. The other justification is, oh look, we have something, we have a mosque. Do we really want to lose that? So that becomes your justification. So all of these things are justifications, and the question is, do I have to buy into that justification? Because I am independent of that. I don't have to buy into your, cheap justifications. And this is the attitude that Muslims need to adopt. And we need to start accounting these bodies that claim to represent the Muslims, claim to represent Islam, however, failing miserably when it matters.
You said a couple of times we need to account. How can we account? What is the process of accounting? Because there's so many voices, so many people that are out there, so many scholars, Muslim institutions, organizations. How do you account? What are the things? I know we're having this discussion here, and this is going to go on YouTube and so on and so forth. But in terms of how do you physically go on account? Do you go and speak to those institutions? Do you speak to those?
Definitely, if you have the opportunity, you go and speak to them directly. What we're discussing now, these are discussions that are very relevant to those people as well. And we can have these discussions, how far you're going to get with that, I don't know. Other times when they are blatantly in violation of something, in Islam, we should, yes, privately maybe address them. And if that doesn't work, if the matter is public, then we can discuss it in public as well. And we shouldn't shy away from questioning their positions. We shouldn't shy away. And why I say this, these people, they say they're apolitical because the Charities Commission, compels them to be apolitical. But what we find is that they become very political, given certain situations. So be it time for election, it's a good time for election. Yes, it's your obligation to go out there and vote. Or, what happened to your apolitical position? Because this is what the government wants.
This is where I would agree with you. Yeah, and I can understand where you're coming from.
But my thing is that this is shaping the Muslim mind. This is what this community is. It's what you're producing through these activities, through these actions, through these silences, through these, subjects that you choose to focus on and refuse, in other instances, refuse to engage with. You see, this is what creates the Muslim mind. And this is why I'm saying, the community is very much affected, and we are far from where we should be. What we need to be, we're very far from it. It's not because we chose that, it's because we've been conditioned to be that. So our community is a product of, generations of this, culture of omission. It's made what we are. So we naturally focus on things that they tell us that we need to focus on. We naturally ignore or feel that it's beyond us, is because we've been cultured to think that. Yeah.
And we need to change that.
And this is what needs to change. And why I'm discussing this is because we need to really get the Muslims to recognize where it's coming from. They're not like that because they chose to be that. Muslims need to really understand, why is my community the way it is? Why is it so, I'm so paralyzed? Why is it I'm so silent? Why is nobody talking about it? Because in our private discussions, you'll find that Muslims are concerned. Yeah. In our private discussions, Muslims are furious. Yeah. at what is happening. But the question is, does that reflect in the key institutions and bodies and of so-called scholars and what does that reflect there? No. And so this is why I'm saying, it's not happening because it's designed not to happen, because they are controlling the mainstream narrative even within your community.
You've discussed so much. You discussed history. You've discussed the present situation. You've discussed, what we need to do. Yeah. But I've got interesting question. Yeah. Imagine if the holy sites, the Islamic holy sites, were attacked. What would be the response? And I want to finish on that. Just maybe 1 or 2 minutes that you can spend. What would be the response of our community, our leaders, our scholars? What do you think?
Do you know, I personally like to believe that the Muslim community would really take a stand on it. But from my assessment of reality, nothing's going to happen.
When you say Muslim community, I'm not talking about individuals like you and me. We will be shocked and we'll be outraged, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm talking about our leaders, the so-called leaders, the so-called scholars. What do you think? Do you think their response will be harsh?
I don't think so. No, I'm afraid to say, it's a sad situation, but I don't think that the community leaders they'll certainly talk about it so long as the community,
they will not say, look, let's mobilize.
No, because that's
land because they should mobilize.
No,
and defend.
No, because you know what it is. They haven't done.
You're very pessimist, yeah.
I'm not pessimistic in the sense that I've lost faith in the ummah. No way. I have full faith in the ummah, and I think we are moving in the right direction. But I don't trust the leadership that is supposed to really represent the ummah. To really fulfill their responsibility.
Okay. On this note, we will stop here, and we will have another session. And like I said, we'll discuss a bit further. Thank you, Abdus Samad, for coming down.
Exactly.
It's been a enlightened discussion, and I hope we can have another one very soon.